We'll have to buy her some cookies. On behalf of Sue and Francis, I also just want to state our thanks to the staff for making this happen. I think it's been an extraordinarily good meeting, learned a lot, really good discussion. And so just want to add our thanks to those of Peter's. So this is the last session of the Marine Mammal Commission's annual meeting. I'm Andy Reid, one of the commissioners, and the intent and the purpose of this session is to make a transition, a very explicit transition, to the symposium Whales on the Brink that will happen tomorrow at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History down in the mall. And so we just want to get people thinking about that event. And if you have an open calendar, you have nothing to do tomorrow, you should come down because a lot of us are going to be there and it's going to be awesome. And so the purpose of the event, I'm going to ask Laura to describe that in detail, but it's really to do a couple of things, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act and to direct focus on two poorly known species that are in great conservation concern, Rice's whale and North Pacific right whale, but also to focus on North Atlantic right whale and to think what lessons we can draw from them for these two species. So I think it's a really important opportunity for us to elevate public knowledge of those species, to think about what conservation actions, what science we need to do, and lastly, a call to action to actually work together to try and conserve those species. But I'll start and just open it for Laura to tell us about the objectives and the goals for the meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you to the Commission so much for taking the time to highlight this. This symposium started with a very sad stranding of a whale in the Everglades National Park in 2019. And that whale made its long journey to the Smithsonian, thanks to all the partnerships that we had through the network and partnerships we've made over the years. Anyways, that whale made its way here. And John Osowski, who's the most amazing curator of marine mammal parts, had this idea to put it on display and also sort of celebrate it and have this opening of the exhibit. And so he and Michael McGowan approached the Commission and NOAA as they were getting traction within the Smithsonian to sort of start this event. And then it just kind of kept growing and getting bigger and bigger because its purpose was to highlight this species that people don't know anything about. And that's the same sort of challenge we have with North Pacific right whales. And so the symposium became about these whales on the brink that the public knows very little about. They don't see them, they don't interact with them. And so it's to celebrate the pioneering science of the Smithsonian as well, the importance of collections to conservation, and also all the things that we've learned about these species and the challenges. Andy, as you said it perfectly, I don't need to add to that. And so we're super excited about this. It's also a way to celebrate the achievements of the Endangered Species Act, the importance of that act. And so all these things are coming together tomorrow in a full day symposium that we're really grateful to the Marine Mammal Commission, specifically Brady O'Donnell, Dee Allen, and Jackie Sheff as well, and the commissioners who are speaking tomorrow. We're going to cover the Rice's whale discovery. You're going to hear all the stories. There's a lot of good ones about that. We're going to hear about the new science. We're going to hear about conservation and be inspired, I think, tomorrow. So that's what's happening. So I welcome the opportunity to talk about it. I also do want to thank too our NOAA collaborators with Trevor Spradlin, who has been to provide tremendous leadership for this event, as has Eric Patterson, so and Kara Shavanik. So thank you to everybody who's helped make this possible tomorrow. It's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I'd like now to give, so we have representation here from the science side and the regional side from the three regions for the three species of whale, North Atlantic right whales, North Pacific right whales, and the Rice's whale. And I think it would be useful just for folks to hear, like, if they can't be there tomorrow, or to whet their appetite to make sure that they do clear the calendars and come down to the mall. Like, what are the take-home messages you want folks to know about those three species? And I'm going to let you self-organize, but let's go first with North Pacific right whales. And John, maybe we'll start, or either regionally or science, you decide.
Okay, I'm getting a nod from Anne Marie to go. So, yep, now she's goosing me over here, so I got to go. Well, thinking about whales on the brink, and again, as it's being said, the symposium tomorrow looks like it's going to be a terrific event. So if you can come, please come along. In the Pacific, at least in my neck of the woods, when we think about whales on the brink, the poster child is the eastern population of the North Pacific right whale. And The other thing I'll just say, in starting, it's not just an Alaskan issue. Eastern North Pacific right whales are in 5 states: Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, and BC, and Mexico, Canada and Mexico. So it's an international issue in 5 of our states. Those of us who work in Alaska are eager to raise the profile and get going with this highly endangered animal. We figure there are roughly somewhere between 30 and 50, less than 50 still existing, as far as we can tell. They're only seen in a small fraction of their previous range. That historic range is pretty well known from commercial and scientific whaling. They're now absent in most of those areas from their historical whaling grounds. And they're receiving very little attention despite being critically endangered. What you'll hear tomorrow is that the future can change if we do something. Right now, we're not doing much. So one of our goals is to try to get people to pay attention, become aware of what's going on. And what's at stake is that this population of probably less than 50 has not been recovering since whaling of one sort or another, which went from about the 1820s to the 1960s. Some tens of thousands of whales were killed. They have not been recovering since then. The whaling stopped basically over 50 years ago, and we aren't seeing the recovery that folks would have hoped for or expected. That's a problem. So you've got a large whale and a tiny population. That's really vulnerable to extinction. When you get a population that small, it doesn't take much to push it over the edge, whether it's it's living in a rapidly changing environment and everything that brings, human and otherwise, sudden catastrophe or some other unexpected change, whether it's ecological or human activity, could be the end of the story. There are huge gaps in essential information on natural history, demography, ecology, and threats. And without more information on that, we don't know steps to mitigate those threats or to promote recovery. So that's a real bad brew of a challenge. And so our take-home message tomorrow is going to be, and the sort of here is, we feel we need to communicate, sound the alarm, spread the word. This isn't just an Alaska issue, it's a national issue, 5 states, 3 countries. We have to find ways to alert and engage the public, to marshal their energy and concern. I'm convinced, given the way the public has responded to North Atlantic right whales, people all over the country and all over the world are interested in populations that are on the brink. And I'm sure there are people I was going to say in Iowa or Arkansas, no shade on those states, I'm just saying they're non-coastal, that want to, if they knew about conservation issues, they want to be involved. I live in Washington State, and I'm interested in endangered species in Arkansas and so forth. People want to do something, so spread the word. That includes the public and governments. Study and learn more about these whales' demography, migration, habitat, diet. Discover how to help so we can try to manage properly, mitigate threats, promote recovery, and take action now. We don't really know what's been going on for 50 years, but with a tiny population, something's going on and we don't really know what it is. And so, in my view, we need to try to recruit some champions in different sectors to help mobilize teams, communications, science, management, recovery to help address the issue. And we brought some, I don't want to say propaganda. Is this swag or bling? So there's some Propaganda, okay. There's some flyers up here. Help yourself. If you're at the symposium tomorrow, those will be there as well, talking about a summary of some of the issues that Eastern North Pacific right whales are facing these days, and ideas about next steps and what to do to try to make a difference. Anne Marie?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think just to emphasize one of the things you were mentioning, the huge data gaps that we have for North Pacific right whales. I just really want to lend my weight behind the fact that there's hope. There's hope to answer the questions that are out there for North Pacific right whales. There's hope to be able to figure out how we can bring them back from the brink. And so I just really encourage everyone to come out tomorrow. This symposium's really, or the meeting here today has really helped me to understand some of the great partnerships that we could have, some of the great leveraging that can be done between regions, between organizations, between our different partners. And so I think this is a great start. We're in a really good position, and I'm excited and hope to see everybody out tomorrow.
It's awesome. I'll tell you that from my perspective, your last message that it's not too late and that there's hope, that's the most important message we can get out there tomorrow. So if you take one thing from this discussion today, it's not too late to save these three species, and there's hope. So let's take that and be positive and go forward. So now let's turn to rice as well. And Lance and Laura, I don't know how you want to play this, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll kick it off real sort of big picture. Sort of like John said, rice's whales are one of the most endangered whales in the world, with approximately less than 50 or less. They're the only one that sort of spends all their time in our US waters that we know of, and they don't migrate, and that makes them particularly at risk. They live in a very industrialized ocean, but I also want to make the impression that people tend to think of the Gulf of Mexico as industrialized, but it's also a place of tremendous biodiversity, and we're constantly trying to balance the needs of the environment with the economy. So it's a very challenging thing we have ahead of us to address the threats to these whales. We know what a lot of the threats are. What we do about them will take a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnerships, a lot of work. The ESA is a really powerful tool for us to do this, so it's appropriate to celebrate it tomorrow. It's a tool that really promotes collaborative problem solving, and that's what we need. It's not an easy problem to solve. It's going to take time. It's urgent. Yes, it's extremely urgent. And at the same time, it's going to take a lot of commitment and perseverance for us to change their trajectory from near extinction. We can't afford to lose rice's whales. Like I said, we're the US, we're the stewards. The last time a whale that I know of went extinct was 300 years ago, and it would be really devastating to lose these whales in the Gulf and have them be permanently gone. They're important to the oceans, just like all large whales are. And I think the other message that we'll have for tomorrow is certainly this hope that we need public awareness. People don't see these whales, they don't understand their impact. We've accomplished a lot so far. We have a lot more to do. We have a vision for what we want to do in the future with it, but we have limited resources to do that, but we're going to do what we can. We're committed to that. So there's a lot of hope. We have turned the trajectory on many species before. And if we work collaboratively and don't waste time, we can do it again. So those are the sort of high level things. And I'll turn to Lance for.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of the things that John and Laura said, I would just echo those. But I think there's a couple of unique aspects that I see, and it draws on your comment on what we've learned and what we've learned in the last couple of decades about right whales. Where we went from, hey, people kind of knew they were off of Florida, to where we are now is just incredible within 20 years or so, right? And we're kind of at that cusp with rice's whales. That's kind of my first observation. We kind of knew where they were there. We didn't really know how they were related to other Brutus-like whales around the world. But the discovery of the whale, which is not exactly discovery since we knew it was there anyway, has really lit up a lot of public interest. And that's been the biggest part of this story that people are most interested in. And I think it's because it is so rare to discover something new in our world, or it's perceived to be. The work that we've done in the last 5 years is really the first dedicated work on this whale ever. And we're learning just a tremendous amount about what they eat, what their habitats are. And every new buoy that Melissa puts out or passive acoustic array that we put out is a chance for more discovery. And I think that story is a way to help bring the public along as we learn more and more about this whale and become more, have become more invested in it. The other thing I would say in the Gulf of Mexico is, because I kind of grew up around Florida as well. While it's very industrialized, it's also a place where people feel very, very connected to their environment. They spend their time at the beaches, they spend their time out on the water, they spend their time on the rivers. It is, that sort of this is our land, perspective is, I think meaningful in our ocean. And so I think the more that we can tie the whale to that place and to that spirit of that, this, is something that we're learning about together, really will help us build that motivation to try to promote conservation and manage the conflicts with the other uses that we make of the Gulf of Mexico. So that would be my sort of hopefully take home that we'll get from the series of science talks, is just the tremendous amount that we've learned in the last 5 years, the things that we need to learn and that we're really actively moving forward. And again, so we can get ourselves on a footing like right whales, where there is a regular survey program that's designed to learn more about these things and answer these key questions.
Thanks, Lance and Laura. I view things exactly the same way, thinking about North Atlantic right whales as a model in which we worked as a community of scientists and managers really hard to identify the threats, to monitor the population, and then to develop really powerful tools to mitigate those threats. And that's what I'm going to ask Sean and Diane to talk about. And the one thing you're not allowed to ask for is more resources. So, but let's, so from your perspective, if there's a message to get out there tomorrow for North Atlantic right whales, yeah. No, you've got enough resources. You're good.
Yeah, well, that's where I was going to circle back to. I think we just have to really remember, let's not pit one species against another. In the sense, we have to be looking at really the ecosystem, whales, marine mammals at large. I know right whales do get a little more attention than some of our other species for various reasons. And I know Sean alluded to those really eloquently yesterday. But I think there's a lot we can all get from each other and the species. And I think even when you don't have resources, I'm just going to put in a plug for the right whale PVA that we just did. Andy, thank you for being one of our CIE reviewers. The center led that effort with Garfo's support and others, but we didn't have money for that. I found rooms for free. Lands paid for his budget. We brought scientists together, Mike Brunch from USGS, a multi-collaborative effort, and people donated their time for 5+ years to work with us in free rooms with no money to develop this PVA, which just like hit the street, which does give us hope for right whales. We've been managing, for instance, through the Atlantic large whale take reduction team since 1997. So obviously industry has been heavily regulated, will continue to be, and obviously NMFS is working on other threats as well. But I think giving our stakeholders that some of what they're doing and what NMFS is continuing to ask them to do, there's some hope there. And I think the PVA we just launched gives some hope, I think, but also at the same time says more needs to be done. I have a friend in New York City. She lives right down the street from Drew Barrymore. I told her what I did, and she talked about polar bears, but she didn't know about right whales. So I think we still have people in the US who on our East Coast who don't know about right whale either. And to me, that's, that is a problem, of course, but I'll just end with, because I know time's limited. I really think it comes down to a lot of the themes we heard today about working with our partners, working with our stakeholders to find solutions to move things forward. We worked with the Marine Mammal Commission and others on the scenario planning that Kim and Matt mentioned. This was a way to kind of figure out, take kind of some new lenses to look at how we can better manage and research right whales in a changing environment. And I think that that's just a great model that maybe could benefit rice as well and North Pacific right whale, but also there's some lessons learned from us as well that maybe we could have done things better, but hindsight's always 20/20. So hope for sure. I think working with our stakeholders and partners, essential. Funds, great if you have them, but if not, I think you can make a lot of progress without. The PVA is just one of many examples I think NIMS has of making progress on right whales without a lot of funds, and really sharing from each other, and really looking big picture and making sure all these species get the attention they need. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Sean.
So Andy and I were talking about this a little bit last night, and he pointed out you could write a book on this one topic of things we're doing with right whales. And as I think about some of the stuff, I could probably write several books. With that being said, I'll not try and go through all of them right now. Brevity is not my strength, but building on what Diane said, I think some of the lessons we've really learned from right whales is if you kind of sort of a flip phrase I've been using lately is a lesson learned is I think if you build it, they will fund, which is everyone's looking for a solution. And what happened was when things really got to its low point with the right whale, as Andy said, the community really came together and just sort of everyone coalesced around, we need to do something different. And then there were really sort of big ideas that seemed impossible, but we decided we were just going to do it. And it started, and everyone, it was kind of a stone soup approach. Like, so we decided we were going to do ropeless fishing. And that really started with actually Southeast Regional Office and David saying, I've got 150,000 I can throw at this. That 150,000 now is turned into, I think, you could depend on how you want to interpret, but Congress and IRA somewhere put around 50 million into that this year. And that was something that in 2017, Cerro found, $150,000 to let's try this. And they got behind it and said, and we're going full tilt on that. Same with the PVA. We now have this statistical tool and our decision support tool that we have here I just sort of retasked the team the other day. We had Garfo came to me like, hey, we've got this problem with Atlantic sturgeon. What do we do? I'm like, we built this tool. Let's swap out the whale layer and put in this find a sturgeon layer, and boom, we're off to the races with potentially managing sturgeon with a product we built for right whale science. And we've been having discussions about whether or not we could provide this sort of modeling tool with, very minimal data to take on some of these other questions of, evaluating risk in the landscape for these other, data poor species. And so I think that it is the sort of thing where you have these crises. If you build it and you provide a way out on the solution space, that it's possible to get it funded. One of the things we do have with right whales that's different is there's enough of them that we see dead animals, and that I think plays a huge role in dead animals that we link to stakeholder activity very clearly. And I think that's the sort of a missing piece in these other two species. And so, Congress is loyal to the country and its citizens. And when NIMS has to step up and sort of regulate something that impacts the sort of economic potential of a stakeholder, that's when things become a real challenge and issue. And I think that's a bit of a missing piece right now in these other two animals. And I think there's an opportunity there where some of the tools that we've built on right whales could help us evaluate in data poor situations, are there risks of fisheries and vessel strikes to these other two species. And then I'll just finish on the hope thing, that watching right whales sort of in free fall from 2017 or 2010 really to 2020. But then the last couple of years of our stock assessment at least suggests that calving's up, death is down, and actually calving is up above death, which means that the population is actually at least leveled out in the last couple of years. And so we have a reason for hope. And what is really exciting about that is that point in the stock assessment is before the most recent NIMS rule went into effect. So the 60% risk reduction rule that we put in with the lobster fishery kicked in just as that assessment was measured. So we think that, all these sort of big ocean patterns, you're always sort of arm waving about correlation, what really drove it. But, it suggests that the Canadian actions have probably really been effective and starting and reduce a lot of that mortality. And I'm speculating and arm waving here, and it says that the new US regulations that are about to go in place, or that have just gone in place with the entanglement and the fishing regulations and the hopefully very soon vessel speed rule, could just sort of pile on top of that the North Atlantic right whales really might be on the verge of, recovering again. I don't think we want to, or anywhere near taking our foot off the gas. And I'll spend the money if you got it. I'm good at that. But I think there is reason to be optimistic and way we can learn lessons and share on this. So.
Okay, thank you, John. In that vein of good news, I got a text today at lunchtime that today was the first day that aerial survey crew flew in North Carolina. 3 right whales seen off Oregon Inlet, another right whale seen off Virginia Beach. We heard of right whale on the Cape Charles buoy. So whales are moving south to the calving grounds. Let's hope they're all females ready to give birth and we have a good year. So just one more thing. I'm going to try and get us out here a little early so that we can get the place cleaned up. But the commission, in addition to its oversight role, plays a really important role in partnering and supporting our sister agencies in promoting the goals of the MMPA and conserving marine mammals. And we can do things because we're small and we're nimble that sometimes NOAA and the Fish and Wildlife Service can't do. And so guys, my question to all of you are thinking about these 3 species. What is it that the commission could do to help you push forward, in addition to things like the symposium? But are there specific things that we can do to help to promote the conservation of these 3 species? And anybody can take that.
I mean, I think it just ties back to the scenario planning initiative we did. Oh, thank you, Laura. Where, for right whales, at least, vessel strike and entanglement, of course, as they should, those are the focus. Those are the big things. And I think our scenario planning effort helped us think a little bit bigger on recovery, like a tipping point. Francis and I were talking about this in the lunch line, but it really showed that for right whales, you could have an episodic event, a HAB, and that's a tipping point for our species. So it really got us thinking about, all right, we need, Terry Rolls was a part of this. Okay, we really need like an emergency response plan and be thinking about this. We need to be thinking more about climate and prey, which prompted the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, even before all the wind and everything happening there south of New England, but or the islands there, they started sampling for prey like way before all this to bolster that. And there was the idea of tagging as well. And we need to probably be thinking about that a little more, as Sean mentioned the other day. So I think really helping us think about like the big picture, right? Like, sure, yeah, let's focus on the big threats, super important, but let's not lose sight of these other emerging things that tomorrow in 5 years could really be where we're at now with our 2 big threats. So I think just helping put the spotlight on some of these other things and really helping us look at recovery, big picture, which will go back to this great 2 days, is help us put focus on climate as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of maybe 3 things right off the bat. We're just getting into recovery planning. And so we have a recovery outline online. We had some recovery workshops. I think if we move into that recovery planning, I think the commission can be really helpful to us in terms of how we're thinking about that, because again, it's urgent, but it's complicated at the same time. And so that's certainly something that we would look forward to. And obviously these climate discussions play into that. I can let Lance speak to that, but I mean, certainly climate is a concern about prey. We're super interested in the prey in the Gulf of Mexico. The other thing too is we still don't know a lot about the distribution of Rice's whales in other parts of the Gulf, particularly Mexico. And so we know that the Marine Mammal Commission works a lot internationally and with other countries. And so helping, there are already some great bridges built by the Science Center and Mexico. They're fantastic. And I think there's more of that to come in terms of how we do more collaborative research out, within Mexico. And then also that raising awareness thing is key. And that sounds really vague. And I think one thing I'm noticing, there's a lot of confusion and misinformation out there. And we're just starting on Rice's whale recovery. And so I think we could really use help at many different layers and levels of that kind of education is not the right word, but just getting the scientific information out there accurately and consistently and clarifying when it's misunderstood or misrepresented. And I think the commission could play a really big role in that. I have a longer list, but in the interest of brevity.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, Anne Marie.
Yeah, so I guess just to tack on for North Pacific right whales, I would say to help carry the momentum that this event tomorrow will hopefully spark, carry the hope, and then I'm gonna say the R word. So resources are really, really important, and consistency in those resources is really important. And in order to be able to fill these data gaps. And so, and then what Laura was mentioning regarding the international, nature of our species is really important to help build those bridges so that we can make sure we have a full picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it's really good. And I agree with all that. And I think all those things are places that we can work, spaces we can work into. I'll also mention our small grants program, which is not huge, but has funded important work, and has supported important work on some of these species. So yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the other two commissioners or the CSA? Thoughts? Yeah, John.
I just put a word to add on to what Anne Marie was saying about what the commission can do.
Yeah.
First of all, let me thank the commission for being a great partner and hosting this, and tomorrow, active in the symposium and all of that. And I said in my remarks that we need to find some champions. And I think the commission, I want to thank you. You guys have been a champion so far to try to shine a spotlight here on North Pacific right whales and get something moving. So I think my request is for you to continue to be that good partner and champion. The commission can do things that the other federal agencies cannot. You have a unique role and a really important role. And one of the areas that I think that would be one of the next steps to try to improve here is to make the point, this is not just an Alaska issue, and reaching out to the other states and maybe Mexico and Canada, I'm not sure, but to make that point and to work with you guys. I'm not going to say the R word, but we have a lot of ideas. It's not what could we do. We have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done. It's pretty basic stuff. And it's limited by lack of something. And it's hard to say that, anyway, if you can be a champion with us, continue in that you'll be a great partner. And we thank you very much for what you've done so far. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think I speak for the commissioners and the rest of the commission in just letting you know we are committed to do that. We're also committed to talking to the folks who hold the purse strings about the R word and reminding them every time we have an opportunity that we need resources for those two species. So we're absolutely there by your side for that. Yeah, Sean.
Something that's more in the thinking range and that I think we need to really think about is that I've been thinking a lot about recently is as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of these two laws, ESA and MMPA. I've been thinking about these two laws in many respects were just groundbreaking experiments in my mind of conservation theory, right? But they're 50 years old now. And one of the biggest gaps in those two laws in my mind is climate change was an idea back then. I mean, there was early science suggests this was coming, but the concept of ecosystem instability and stationary, much of our management principle and practice is based on the idea of sort of undoing something bad. Or, if we break something, we can fix it and go backwards or whatever. And the two laws are very much based on sort of that the ecosystem is somewhat static. And if there's one thing we know now from all the talks today, the ecosystem is not static. And I think we really need to be thinking about how we're going to practice conservation science under both these laws in a non-stationary ecosystem and really what that means. And one of the big things and as we're sort of struggling to achieve climate mitigation and renewable energy is, you know, the frontier for right whales now is we've sort of we're way into the fight of sort of dealing with fishing gear and vessel strikes. But the frontier is, all right, how do we deal with industrialization processes to meet zero carbon and, you know, carbon capture and renewable energy processes? And we're the landscape to do a lot of this is going to be in the ocean, whether we like it or not. And it's very likely that, you know, the East Coast and the West Coast are going to look a lot like the Gulf of Mexico in the next 20 to 30 years. It's not going to be oil rigs. It's probably going to be wind turbines and other sort of carbon capture infrastructure. And there's going to be a lot of sort of knee-jerk reaction. Well, we can't permit any of this because of take on these animals, but we don't know is the trade-offs of what if we don't meet carbon? We sort of have these conceptual ideas of if we don't hit carbon reduction targets by 2030, 2050, things will be this bad, but we don't know what the trade-offs are to these species other than that will be bad for them. And so I think we need sort of trade-off risk analysis of what are the costs if we don't take these actions relative to what are the short-term costs of, you know, an increased bycatch if aquaculture or kelp farming is a carbon mitigation tool, and I think that's a whole area of thinking that really I think the commission could lead with small grants and sort of think tank efforts, you know, to sort of, you know, and work study groups to sort of think about those things and define how we go about doing that science. So.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that's a good existential point to end on. Unless there are any other burning questions, I want to remind everybody that the event tomorrow will be live streamed. So if you can't make it, you can sit at your desks while you're pretending to work and watch and listen. But I hope that we'll see a lot of you there in person. And I just want to thank everybody for staying. I want to thank all of our partners for organizing this event tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. It's a great lineup. I've seen a bunch of the talks already. It's going to be awesome. So I want to thank all of you and thank you for staying. Peter, you want anything else to end with? Then I would say the 2023 annual meeting of the Marine Mammal Commission is closed. Thank you very much.